I still remember the morning when the sound of church bells cut through the fog like a memory I couldn't escape. Savannah wakes up slowly, like an old man stretching after a long dream, and I was part of that rhythm, steady, predictable, quietly fading into the background. That morning, the air smelled of salt and jasmine. The azaleas outside my porch had begun to bloom early, a sure sign that spring was stubbornly claiming her ground. I sat in my rocking chair with a cup of black coffee, the Savannah Morning News folded neatly beside me, same as every day. My late wife, Margaret, used to tease me for reading the obituaries first. "You just want to make sure you're still alive, Ben," she'd say. I used to laugh. Now, I just read in silence. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. My name is Benjamin Carter, 63 years old, retired railroad engineer, widower for almost 8 years. The house I sit in, our house, was built with the kind of love you don't see anymore. 2 stories, white shutters, magnolia tree in the yard that Margaret planted herself. Every corner still carries her touch. The lace curtains she stitched by hand, the photographs of us at Tybee Beach, the faded note she left in my Bible that says, "Don't forget to breathe, my love." For a while, breathing was all I knew how to do. Then Daniel called. My only son. His voice on the phone was shaky, tired. "Dad, Clara's pregnant again. I lost my job at the plant. I didn't even hesitate. Come home, son. Bring her with you. We'll figure it out." That was 7 years ago. When they first moved in, the house came alive again. Clara filled the kitchen with the smell of cinnamon bread. Daniel fixed the broken railing on the porch. Evenings were soft with laughter, and little Ella, barely 3 then, used to run barefoot down the hallway, calling, "Grandpa, chase me." It felt like God was giving me a second chance at family. I set the extra plates on the dinner table that first night, polished the old silverware, and lit the candle Margaret had saved for special occasions. Maybe this was one. Daniel sat across from me, his hair unkempt but his eyes grateful. Clara smiled politely, too politely. She had that firm tone some women get when they've had to fight too hard for too long. I respected that until I realized later that her kind of strength didn't bend, it took. Back then, I didn't see the signs. After supper, Daniel helped me wash the dishes, just like when he was a boy. He said, "Dad, Clara's a bit nervous about staying here. She's used to running her own home." I nodded. "That's fine. This place has enough room for all of us." "Brad!" Any too. But even as I said it, I felt the echo of Margaret's voice whisper inside me. "Ben, be careful what you give away." Days turned into weeks. Savannah kept her pace slow, humid, patient. The neighborhood dogs barked at nothing. The mailman left catalogs I never ordered. Inside the house, however, the rhythm began to shift. Clara rearranged the living room furniture for better flow. She replaced Margaret's floral curtains with beige blinds. The smell of cinnamon disappeared, replaced by the scent of lemon disinfectant. Daniel said it was just her way of making the place feel fresh. I tried to believe him. One Sunday morning, I came downstairs in my church shirt, ready for service. Clara looked me over and said gently, "Dad, we're going to try the new church near the mall. They've got a children's program for Ella. Maybe you'd be more comfortable at street." "Luke's on your own?" Her tone was sweet, but her eyes said, "This isn't your family's church anymore." So I went alone. Sat in the third pew from the back, where Margaret and I used to sit. Pastor Tom preached about humility and forgiveness, and I tried to listen, but all I could think about was the sound of laughter back home, laughter that no longer needed me. That evening, when I returned, the house smelled like takeout pizza and spilled juice. Ella ran up to me with her hands sticky and asked, "Mr. Benjamin, can I show you my new toy?" Mr. Benjamin. I froze for a second, forcing a smile. Clara walked by with a plate, pretending not to notice. Daniel was on his phone. I went to the porch, sat down, and stared at the magnolia tree. The wind had picked up, scattering white petals across the steps like tiny ghosts. I whispered to the air, "We still have our house, Margaret." But even as I said it, I could feel it slipping away. A few weeks passed before I realized that the house had stopped sounding like home. No more music in the kitchen, no more laughter spilling down the hallway. Just the hum of Clara's vacuum cleaner and the faint tap of her heels on the hardwood floor. She started keeping a small ledger, expenses, grocery lists, even my electricity bills. One morning, I found it lying open on the counter. My name, written in neat blue ink, was next to the words, Social Security Income, Contribution, Endeavor. I closed it quietly and made myself another cup of coffee. I didn't need confrontation. I needed peace. But peace, it seemed, had left the building. One afternoon, I came home from my volunteer shift at the church pantry and found my things moved. My chair, the one Margaret bought me for our 20th anniversary, was no longer in the living room. It sat upstairs in the attic, under a tarp, next to old boxes of Christmas lights. Daniel stood there, awkward, rubbing the back of his neck. Clara thought we could use the space better for Ella's play area, he mumbled. I stared at him for a long time. That chair was your mother's favorite spot, I said. I know, Dad, but Ella needs room to play. I wanted to argue, to tell him that memories need room, too. But the words got stuck somewhere between my chest and my throat. I simply nodded and went upstairs. That night, I couldn't sleep. The attic was hot and smelled of dust and cedar. I sat on that old chair, the floorboards creaking beneath me, and listened to the sounds of the house, Clara's laughter, Daniel's low voice, Ella's giggle muffled but clear. I used to be the heart of that noise. Now, I was just an echo. The next morning, I made pancakes for everyone. It was something Margaret used to do on Saturdays. When I placed the plate on the table, Clara smiled thinly. Oh, we've been trying to cut down on sugar, Mr. Benjamin. Ella's on a no-carb plan. No carb. For a 10-year-old. I smiled back, set the syrup down anyway, and said, Then I suppose I'll eat her share. Daniel laughed a little, nervous, the way a man laughs when he knows the truth but doesn't dare speak it aloud. After breakfast, I stepped outside, sat on the porch, and let the sun warm my face. The magnolia tree rustled softly, like it was whispering secrets I wasn't supposed to hear. Across the street, my neighbor Patricia Lane was watering her flowers. She waved, her garden hat tilted just so. Patricia had been Margaret's friend. They used to trade recipes and gossip about the preacher's new car. Now she just gave me that look people give widowers, a mix of pity and polite distance. I waved back. Morning, Patricia. Morning, Ben. How's the family? They're busy, I said. She smiled knowingly. That's what families do. They get busy. Maybe she was right. Or maybe that was just how people excused neglect. Later that day, I opened the old photo album, our wedding picture, Daniel's first baseball game, Margaret's smile frozen forever at age 58. I ran my thumb along the edge of her photo. Would you have let them change the curtains? I whispered. The photo didn't answer, of course, but I could almost hear her laugh, warm, teasing, unshakable. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I walked downstairs, turned off the kitchen light, and stood in the middle of the living room. The beige blinds hung stiff where her floral curtains once danced with the wind, I whispered, almost to the walls themselves. You built this home, Margaret, and I'll be damned if I let it forget you. The air felt heavy, charged, like the stillness before a storm. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Clara's voice floated faintly through the vent, sharp, impatient. Daniel answered softly, apologetic. I sat back down on the last step of the staircase, letting the dark swallow the room. The truth was already forming inside me, though I didn't want to face it yet. This wasn't my home anymore. Still, I promised myself one thing before I went to sleep that night. Whatever was coming, I would not go quietly. It's strange how control doesn't arrive with a shout, but with a whisper. At first, it was the little things, the thermostat, the grocery list, what brand of detergent we used. Clara called it streamlining the household. I called it invisible eviction. Every morning, I'd come downstairs to find the kitchen already rearranged. The coffee pot moved, the mugs on another shelf, the sugar jar hidden behind protein powder. When I asked about it, Clara smiled, that polite smile of hers. Oh, I just thought it'd be more efficient this way, Mr. Benjamin. She always used that Mr. as if drawing a borderline right through the living room. Ella caught on quickly. Kids do. She'd look at me uncertainly, waiting to see how I reacted when her mother corrected her. It's Mr. Benjamin, honey, not Grandpa. The first time she said it, something in me cracked a little. Not loud enough for anyone to hear, but enough for me to feel. Daniel never said a word. At dinner, he'd carve the roast chicken, pour lemonade into their glasses, and pretend not to see the new seating arrangement. Clara sat at the head of the table now. I'd been moved to the far end, close to the kitchen door. The meal was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every fork scrape sound like a confession. Ella swung her legs under the table, humming softly to herself until Clara whispered, "Sit still, baby." I looked at the little girl, so full of light, and wondered what she'd remember when she was my age. Would she recall her grandfather's stories, or just her mother's rules? I tried to keep the peace. That's what you do when you've lived long enough. You pick your battles like you pick ripe peaches. Gently, afraid they might bruise. So I fixed the railing, trimmed the hedges, paid the HOA fees before Clara even noticed the envelope. One afternoon, she came home early and found me polishing Margaret's old silverware. She frowned. "Oh, those are too old-fashioned, Mr. Benjamin. Maybe we should donate them to the church sale. As a klein or, and is different." I looked at her and said quietly, "They were my wife's wedding gift." She hesitated, then shrugged. "All the more reason to let someone else make use of them." The house fell silent after that. Even the clock ticked softer, as if it, too, didn't want to offend her. That evening, Daniel poured himself a beer and sat next to me on the porch. He didn't speak at first, just stared at the road, the street lights flickering on one by one. Finally he said, "Dad, Clara's just trying to help. You know how she gets when things aren't orderly." I nodded. "I do. But you might want to remember, son, some things lose their meaning when you keep them too clean." He looked down, ashamed, but said nothing. Inside, I could hear the faint sound of Clara's laughter over the television. Sharp, controlled, like a blade running over silk. The kind of laughter that told you who really owned the air in that house. A few days later, the house began to feel like someone else's museum. My history behind glass, carefully dusted but never touched. Clara's decorating spree didn't stop with the curtains or the silverware. Now she was updating the look of the living room. The floral rug Margaret chose 40 years ago was rolled up and carried out to the curb. A new one arrived the next day, gray, geometric, cold. She called it modern. I called it erasure. I watched her supervise the delivery men, hands on her hips, directing them like an orchestra. Daniel hovered nearby, pretending to help but mostly staying quiet. Ella peeked from the stairs, clutching her stuffed bear. When the men left, Clara clapped her hands. "Doesn't it feel lighter in here?" I didn't answer. I was still looking at the faint outline of the old rug, the ghost of its pattern pressed into the wood. That night, I ate dinner alone at the porch table. The air smelled of cut grass and leftover rain. I could hear them inside, TV on, dishes clinking, the hum of their world that no longer had room for me. When you get old, people don't take away your things all at once. They do it slowly, kindly, one memory at a time, until you forget what the house used to sound like when it belonged to you. The next morning, Clara told Daniel she wanted to start retraining Ella's manners. "Mr. Benjamin spoils her too much," she said within earshot. I was at the sink, rinsing my mug. "She's just a child, Clara. Childhood's supposed to be soft." Clara smiled without warmth. "And adulthood's supposed to be strong. We're raising her for the real world." I didn't respond. Instead, I took my coffee and walked outside. The porch creaked beneath my weight, the same creak Margaret once complained about, but secretly loved. It meant I was home. Patricia Lane, my neighbor, called out from across the street. "Morning, Ben. Haven't seen you at the Wednesday bingo night lately." I waved back. "Been busy learning how to live in someone else's house." She tilted her head. "That bad?" I smiled faintly. "Let's just say I've got new landlords now." Patricia frowned. "You call me if you ever need a break, all right?" I nodded. I probably wouldn't, but it felt good to know someone noticed. That evening, Clara hosted a family dinner. Roast chicken again, everything spotless, the smell of lemon cleaner lingering like a warning. She spoke about Ella's upcoming school project and Daniel's job hunt as if I weren't sitting 3 feet away. Halfway through the meal, Ella reached for a piece of cornbread and accidentally spilled her lemonade. Clara stiffened. "Ella!" The girl froze, eyes wide. I instinctively grabbed a towel and wiped the table. "It's just a little spill." Clara took the towel from my hand and said firmly, We're teaching responsibility, Mr. Benjamin. Something inside me, small, quiet, patient, finally stirred. I set down my fork and looked at her. You're not teaching responsibility, you're teaching fear. The room went silent. Even the air stopped moving. Daniel looked between us, helpless. Clara blinked, recovering fast. That's enough for tonight. I stood up, pushing my chair back slowly. You're right. It is. I was allotted. That was recast. I went out to the porch, sat down, and let the night wrap around me. The television inside played some reality show laughter, sharp and hollow. Out here, the only sound was the crickets and the whisper of the magnolia leaves. I could almost hear Margaret's voice again, soft, steady, unafraid. And for the first time in a long while, I felt something stronger than sadness. Ella's 10th birthday was coming up, and for once, the house didn't feel heavy. She'd been counting down the days with chalk marks on the fridge board, little white lines, like hope drawn by a child's hand. Every morning, she'd ask, Mr. Benjamin, do you think I'll get a real bike this year? And every morning I'd smile and say, if wishes had wheels, sweetheart, you'd already be flying. But inside, I knew she wouldn't get one. Not from her parents. Daniel was still between jobs, and Clara had 100 reasons why a 10-year-old isn't ready for road traffic. 34. Still, I couldn't stand seeing that quiet disappointment in Ella's eyes. So, one Wednesday afternoon, I took the bus downtown to Harper's Bike and Gear, a small shop that smelled like oil and rubber, and the kind of summers we used to have. The man behind the counter was about my age, wearing a cap that read, Life's a Ride. He asked, Looking for a gift, sir? I nodded. For my granddaughter. She's 10, always dreaming of a turquoise bike. He smiled knowingly. Turquoise, huh? That's a good color, brave, but kind. He wheeled out a small model with white handles and silver streamers that danced when the fan blew. It looked like freedom. The price tag stung almost half my monthly Social Security check, but I didn't hesitate. I paid in cash, asked him to wrap it with a ribbon, and signed my name on the receipt. Benjamin Carter. The bus ride home was long. I watched the sunset smear the sky over the marshes, the way Margaret used to point out every evening. Look, Ben, even the sky knows how to start over. For the first time in months, I caught myself smiling. When I wheeled the bike into the yard, the evening light hit the turquoise paint and made it glow. Ella's voice came from the porch, sharp with surprise. Is that for me? Before I could answer, Clara stepped out behind her. Her eyes froze on the bicycle like it was a crime scene. Benjamin, she said flatly, what is this? It's for Ella, I replied quietly. Her birthday's tomorrow. Clara crossed her arms. We agreed no extravagant gifts. Daniel and I are trying to teach her the value of patience. I tried to stay calm. It's just a bike, Clara. Kids remember their first one forever. She stepped closer, lowering her voice but not her tone. What you call love, I call undermining. We have rules in this house, Mr. Benjamin. Something about that, Mr. Again, cold, dismissive, cut deep. Daniel appeared at the doorway, holding a coffee mug like it might shield him. He didn't meet my eyes. Dad, he muttered. Maybe you should have talked to Clara first. Talk to Clara first. The words echoed in my head like a slap. Ella looked between us, her face flushed with confusion. But I love it, Mom. It's the color I wanted. Clara's voice snapped like glass. Inside, Ella. Now. The girl hesitated, tears already forming. Go. End quote. Have a done readers of the Sunded. No way have a done readers of the tops. And pleases the Dunry with Kumbada des. And just like that, she was gone. I stood there in the fading light, one hand still resting on the bike seat, the other trembling against my side. I didn't mean to cause trouble, I said, mostly to the wind. Clara sighed loudly, arms still crossed. You never mean to. But somehow, you always do. She pointed toward the street. Return it tomorrow. Get your refund. I looked down at the turquoise frame, at that shimmer of joy that had already begun to dull under her shadow. I wanted to shout, to tell her she was crushing something far more fragile than metal. But my voice stayed in my chest. Instead, I wheeled the bike toward the shed. Each turn of the tire against the gravel sounded like an apology I never gave. The next morning, The sun came in thin and pale through the blinds, the kind of light that makes everything look washed out. I made coffee, black and bitter, and sat at the kitchen table, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Somewhere upstairs, Clara's heels clicked against the floor, steady, precise, like a metronome counting down the beats of my patience. The turquoise bike leaned against the porch railing outside. The dew on the seat sparkled like tiny tears. I had planned to take it back that morning. Really, I had. But every time I looked at it, I saw Ella's face, bright, unguarded, pure joy, before the world told her it was wrong to want something simple. So, I just sat there, holding the mug, wondering when doing the right thing started to feel so much like surrender. Clara came down dressed for errands, keys jingling in her hand. She barely looked at me. "Did you return it?" "Not yet," I said. "Thought I'd wait until Ella leaves for school." She pursed her lips. "We agreed, Benjamin." "No," I said quietly. "You decided." Her head snapped toward me, surprised, like she hadn't expected the old man to bite back. Before she could respond, Ella appeared in the doorway, backpack slung over her shoulder. Her eyes went straight to the bike. "Mom, please don't take it back. I'll be careful, I promise." Clara crouched down, voice firm but sugar-coated. "Sweetheart, we've talked about this." "Grandpa," Mr. Benjamin overstepped. "It's not about the bike. It's about discipline." I could feel something rise inside me, quiet but heavy, like a tide. "Discipline," I said slowly, "is what you teach when you want control. Love is what you give when you want them to grow." Clara stood up straight, her tone sharpening. "This is exactly why I can't have you interfering. You undermine me in front of my child." "My granddaughter," I corrected, finally looking her in the eyes. Daniel walked in mid-confrontation, still half asleep, holding a slice of toast. "What's going on?" Clara didn't miss a beat. "Your father bought the bike we agreed not to get. I told him to return it." Daniel sighed, rubbed his temples. "Dad, you know how she feels about." "How she feels?" I interrupted. "Do I get a vote in my own house, or just the bills?" The words hung in the air. Even Daniel didn't have an answer. Ella whispered, "Please, Grandpa, don't fight." Her voice broke me more than Clara's ever could. Clara exhaled sharply and stepped closer to the door. "Enough! I'm calling the store. They can come pick it up." She turned her back, already dialing, her voice calm, transactional, as if she were ordering groceries. That's when I reached for the handlebars. My hands trembled, not from age this time, but from something sharper. "Don't," I said. She froze, phone still in her hand. "This isn't about a bike, Clara. It's about respect. You've taken my space, my voice, and now you're taking my right to give a child joy. You don't get to have all of it." Daniel tried to step in. "Dad, let's just—" I cut him off. "Son, look at her. Look at what she's teaching your daughter. That love comes with rules. That kindness is a violation." Silence. Even the refrigerator seemed to stop humming. Clara's face flushed red. "You're being ridiculous. You think this makes you noble? You're just an old man trying to buy relevance." Her words landed like stones, but they didn't break me this time. They only hardened something that had been soft too long. I pushed the bike gently toward the porch steps. "Maybe so, but I'd rather buy relevance than live without meaning." I rolled it out onto the driveway, sunlight catching the turquoise frame one last time. Ella stood in the doorway, tears streaming silently. I knelt beside her, brushed her hair back. "Don't ever apologize for wanting something good, sweetheart," I said. "The world will try to make you." She hugged me tightly, small arms around my neck, before Clara pulled her away. I didn't fight it. I just watched them disappear inside, the door closing with that soft, final click that sounded far too much like goodbye. The street was empty except for me and the bicycle. My hands trembled as I looked at the ribbon fluttering in the wind. "If Margaret were here," I whispered, "she'd tell me to stop swallowing my pride." I stood there a long time before I finally spoke again. "Maybe it's time I listen." It has waxed in deficence. The rain started sometime after midnight, soft at first, like a whisper on the old window panes. Savannah has that kind of rain, gentle, polite, but steady enough to remind you that time moves whether you want it to or not. I couldn't sleep, The argument from the week before still lingered like a bad echo. Clara and Daniel had gone to bed hours ago, the sound of their laughter downstairs fading into that quiet that doesn't feel peaceful, just empty. I sat at the edge of my bed, staring at the framed photo of Margaret on the dresser. Her smile looked almost alive in the flicker of the streetlight outside. "I'm trying, Maggie," I murmured, "but I don't think they see me anymore." There was a chill in the air, so I put on my old brown jacket, the one she used to patch up with little square stitches, and decided to go for a walk. Sometimes, when you can't talk to the people you love, you talk to the town instead. The streets of Savannah were quiet that night. The Spanish moss hung low and still. I passed the corner diner, the one that used to open 24 hours, but now only stays open till 9. Its neon sign blinked weakly, spelling "Eat one moment and at the next." A few blocks down, the convenience store beside the Chinese takeout was still lit. "Jin's Market," the sign read. I pushed the door open, the bell jingling faintly. Behind the counter, old Mr. Jin looked up from his paper. "Late night, Mr. Carter?" "Couldn't sleep," I said, pulling a few crumpled bills from my wallet. "Figured I'd grab a drink." He smiled knowingly. "Or maybe a little luck." He gestured toward the bright screen of the lottery terminal. I chuckled. "Haven't bought one of those in years." "Then maybe tonight's the night," he said, handing me a slip. I hesitated, then scribbled 6 numbers that came without thinking. Daniel's birthday, Ella's, and Margaret's. 3 people who shaped everything I was, for better or worse. When the ticket slid out, I signed the back Benjamin Carter and tucked it carefully into my wallet. Mr. Jin handed me my change and nodded. "You never know, Mr. Carter. Sometimes heaven remembers." The words stayed with me all the way home. The house was dark when I came back. I left my shoes by the door, poured myself a glass of water, and set the lottery ticket on the coffee table beside the remote. I didn't think much of it, just another small act in a long, quiet life. Before heading upstairs, I paused by the framed photo of Ella on the mantel, her gap-toothed smile, her hands gripping the handlebars of that turquoise bike she never got to ride. My chest ached. "Sleep well, sweetheart," I whispered, turning off the light. Morning arrived with the kind of brightness that feels wrong too sharp for what it brings. I was halfway down the stairs when I heard Clara's voice, high and trembling, from the living room. "Oh my God, Daniel, oh my God, you need to look at this." At first, I thought something terrible had happened. I hurried the last few steps, my knees protesting. "What's going on?" I asked. Clara turned, her face flushed with excitement. In her hand was the lottery ticket, my ticket, her nails pressed into the paper like she was afraid it might fly away. $85 million, she gasped. $85 million, Daniel, can you believe it? Daniel stood frozen, blinking at the ticket. "Wait, that's the one from the table?" She nodded, breathless. "It was just sitting here, on the coffee table. This is it, Daniel. This is ours." The word hit me like a chill. "Ours. I bought that ticket," I said slowly. "Last night. Signed my name on the back." Clara laughed a strange, sharp sound. "Oh, come on, Mr. Benjamin. You must be mistaken. Daniel and I bought one too, remember? We talked about it last week." "No," I said firmly. "That one's mine. Look at the signature." Daniel hesitated, took the ticket, turned it over, and there it was. My name, written in my neat, shaking hand. He looked at Clara, uncertain. She smiled tightly, eyes darting like a fox cornered. "Well," she said, "maybe you meant it for us. You know, like a gift. I mean, you always said you wanted to help the family." "Not like this," I said. Her voice hardened. "We've been struggling, Benjamin. You live here rent-free, eat the groceries we buy, and you're talking about ownership? Maybe it's time we got something back for all that generosity." The air turned heavy. I could hear my heart beat louder than her words. Daniel's jaw clenched, and for a brief second I thought he might stand up for me. But then he said, quietly, Maybe Mom's right. You always said we're family. What's yours is ours, right?" I stared at him. This grown man who once held my hand to cross the street, now unable to meet my eyes. Clara folded her arms, triumphant. "Good. We're all on the same page then." And just like that, something inside me, something I thought was long dead, began to stir. The rest of that morning moved like a bad dream you can't wake from. Clara's voice filled the house, sharp, constant, the kind that could turn even sunlight bitter. She was on the phone, her tone bright and fake, already talking about next steps and life-changing news. Daniel followed her around like a shadow, nodding, silent. I sat in my chair by the window, the same one I'd used to rock Ella when she was a baby. The world outside looked the same, the oak tree, the mail truck rolling by, Mrs. Whitman walking her dog, yet everything inside had changed. After lunch, Clara came into the living room with a tight smile. "Benjamin, we need to make some space," she said. "There's going to be a lot of people, reporters, maybe even a lawyer or two. It's going to be chaos for a while." I looked up slowly. "Space?" "Yes," she said briskly. "Your room upstairs. We need it cleared out. We'll convert it into an office for now." "You're asking me to leave my room?" She crossed her arms. "I'm telling you, it's temporary." My voice came out quieter than I expected. "And where exactly do you expect me to go?" "The attic," she said. "There's enough space for a bed. We'll move your things this afternoon." I let out a low laugh, the kind that hurts more than it helps. "The attic," I repeated. "That's where folks put the things they don't need but can't throw away yet." Clara didn't answer. She just turned to Daniel. "Can you start moving his boxes, please?" He hesitated, looking at me. "Dad, maybe it's just for a few days." I stood up, the room suddenly too small for air. "A few days?" I said. "Do you even hear yourselves? You're building a life on something that isn't yours." Clara's smile vanished. "Enough. We've had this conversation. That ticket was meant for us. You can play the martyr all you want, but it doesn't change the truth." I took a step closer. "Truth?" I said, my voice steady now, almost calm. "Let me ask you something, Clara. Did either of you even read the name on the back of that ticket?" Daniel looked away. Clara's jaw tightened, but she didn't answer. "I'll take that as a no," I said. I picked up my coat from the chair, my hands surprisingly steady. "Don't worry. You can have the room. You can have the house. You can even have your silence, Daniel. But one day, you'll have to look your daughter in the eye and tell her what you did to her grandfather." I wouldn't too all. Ella came down the stairs just then, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Grandpa, where are you going?" I forced a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Just stepping out for a bit, sweetheart," Clara snapped. "Ella, upstairs, now." The little girl hesitated, eyes darting between us. "But Mom, now!" Clara barked. Ella ran up the stairs, her soft footsteps fading away. I turned back to them, to the son I'd raised and the woman who'd hollowed him out. "Money's a funny thing," I said quietly. "It shows who we really are. Sometimes too late." Then I walked out. The rain had started again, steady and cold. I dragged my old suitcase down the porch steps, its wheels rattling against the wood. The street shimmered under the amber glow of the streetlights. Savannah smelled like wet earth and salt from the bay. Each step felt heavier than the last, not because of age, but because of everything I was leaving behind, the walls I built with my hands, the echoes of laughter that once filled this house, the promise I made to Margaret that our family would never fall apart. Halfway down the block, I stopped and looked back. Through the window, I could see Clara on the phone again, pacing, animated, like someone rehearsing for fame. Daniel stood behind her, still and small, like a shadow that forgot it used to be a man. I thought about shouting, about pounding on the door, about screaming the truth until someone heard me. But what would be the point? Some truths don't need noise, they just need time. I whispered to the rain, "They'll see it, Maggie. One day they'll see everything." That night, I walked until my legs ached. The rain had stopped, but the streets still glistened under the dim yellow lights of downtown Savannah. Every window I passed showed a life I no longer belonged to, a family gathered around dinner, a couple watching TV, the sound of a dog barking behind a screen door. I stopped when I saw the red glow of a small Chinese restaurant, Golden Dragon. The air smelled of soy and ginger, warm and inviting. Through the fogged window, I could see an old couple wiping down tables. Their movements were slow, steady, the kind that come from decades of doing the same thing side by side. When I pushed the door open, a little brass bell chimed. The woman behind the counter looked up, her smile soft but cautious. "Late dinner?" she asked. "Maybe just something warm," I said. "And do you happen to know if anyone rents a room nearby?" She hesitated, then turned to the man beside her, small, wiry, with a weathered face and kind eyes. They exchanged a few quiet words in Mandarin before he nodded. "We have room upstairs," he said in a gentle accent. "Small, but clean. You want to see?" I nodded. He led me through the back hallway, up a narrow staircase that creaked like an old song. The room was just big enough for a bed, a dresser, and a small window overlooking the alley. A faint smell of fried rice lingered in the curtains. "I'll take it," I said. He smiled, as if relieved. "Good. You rest. Tomorrow we talk about rent." That night, for the first time in a long while, I slept without the sound of voices arguing through the walls. The next morning, Mrs. Lee, that was her name, knocked on my door. She held a tray with congee, a boiled egg, and a cup of hot tea. "Breakfast," she said simply. "Eat while it's warm." I tried to pay her, but she shook her head. "No money. You look tired. My husband says you remind him of his father, proud, but lonely." I smiled faintly. He's not wrong. After she left, I sat by the small window, sipping tea, and took out the only things I had left that mattered: my wallet, the folded receipt from Jin's Market, and the original lottery ticket signed, dated, and still mine. It's strange how something so small can hold so much weight. A scrap of paper that could ruin you or save you, depending on who holds it. I placed the ticket carefully inside a metal lockbox I'd bought years ago, the one I used for Margaret's keepsakes. Then I went out to find Mr. Jin. The bell above his shop door jingled when I entered. He looked up, surprised. "Mr. Carter," he said. "I was hoping you'd come by. I heard the winning ticket came from my store." "Big news." "Yeah," I said quietly. "That's actually why I'm here." He frowned, sensing the heaviness in my tone. "What happened?" I told him everything, not in anger, not even with tears, just the plain, awful truth. When I finished, he let out a long breath and disappeared into the back room. A moment later, he returned holding a USB drive. "The security camera," he said. "It shows every sale last week. You were the one who bought that ticket, I remember. You even joked about using birthdays." He slid the drive across the counter. "Take it. Maybe one day you'll need it." I swallowed hard. "Thank you, Mr. Jin. You didn't have to." He raised a hand. "Good people deserve proof. That's how the world should work." As I left the store, the late morning sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days. It felt like the world was finally listening again. That afternoon, back in my small room above the restaurant, I called the Georgia Lottery office. The woman on the line transferred me to a man named Grant Holloway, a legal representative in the claims department. His voice was calm but precise. "Mr. Carter," he said, "we received multiple inquiries about that ticket. You're saying it's yours?" "Yes," I replied, "and I can prove it." There was a pause on the line, then a low hum of interest. "I'd like to meet with you in person," he said. "Do you still have the original?" "I do," I said, "and every reason in the world to protect it." A few days later, Mr. Holloway called back. His voice over the phone was calm but deliberate, the kind of voice that made you feel both uneasy and hopeful at the same time. "Mr. Carter, I've reviewed your claim," he said. "Would you be able to come to our Savannah regional office tomorrow morning? Bring everything you mentioned, the receipt, the ticket, and any supporting evidence." "I'll be there," I told him. The next morning, I shaved for the first time in a week, put on my cleanest shirt, and walked the 15 minutes to the lottery office. The air smelled of damp magnolia and exhaust, and for once, I felt steady. Every step felt like a quiet reclaiming of something I'd let go long ago, dignity. The Georgia Lottery regional office sat in a brick building downtown, across from a park where pigeons gathered around an old fountain. Inside, the air conditioning hummed softly, and a receptionist with red glasses smiled as I gave my name. "Mr. Carter, Mr. Holloway is expecting you," she said, leading me down a short hallway. Grant Holloway was a man in his late 40s, neatly dressed, with a calmness that felt earned. His handshake was firm, his eyes clear, the kind of man who'd seen enough lies to recognize the truth when it stood in front of him. "Mr. Carter," he said, gesturing toward the chair across from his desk. "Thank you for coming in." "Thank you for listening," I replied. He folded his hands, studying me. "You said you have proof that the winning ticket was purchased and signed by you?" I nodded and placed everything on his desk, the original ticket, the receipt from Jin's Market, and a printed frame from the store's camera footage that Mr. Jin had extracted for me. Holloway examined each item carefully. "The timestamp on this matches the sale in our system," he murmured. "And this video still—" "Yes, that's clearly you." He looked up. "Mr. Carter, you may have just saved yourself a lot of trouble." I let out a quiet breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "So, what happens now?" "Well," he said, leaning back, "there's a process. We'll need to verify your ID, confirm your handwriting against your signature on file, and issue a temporary hold on any pending claim made by the other parties, Daniel and Clara Carter. Correct?" My stomach tightened at the sound of their names. "That's right," he nodded. "They filed a claim 2 days ago. Said the ticket was a gift from you." A bitter smile crept to my lips. "I bet they did." Holloway's gaze softened. "We see this more often than you'd think, Mr. Carter. Families, friends, co-workers, money makes strange enemies." "I didn't lose my enemies," I said quietly. "I raised them." For a moment, he didn't speak. Then he reached into his drawer and slid a document across the desk. "This is a statement of ownership. It declares you as the sole rightful claimant to the prize, pending final verification. If you sign here, it initiates our investigation formally." I looked at the pen for a long second before taking it. My hand trembled slightly as I signed, not from age, but from the weight of everything that signature meant. When the ink dried, Holloway said, "Mr. Carter, I can't promise this will be easy. They might contest it. Lawyers, media, public noise, it can get ugly." I met his eyes. "It's already ugly, son. I just want the truth to have a name again, mine." He smiled faintly, then stood and offered his hand again. "You have it now, and you have my word I'll see this through." Tuow. That evening, back in my small room above the restaurant, I opened my little metal safe. Inside were the ticket, the receipts, and now a copy of the signed declaration. The fading sunlight spilled through the window, hitting the papers with a quiet glow. Downstairs, I could hear the clatter of dishes and the familiar rhythm of Mrs. Lee humming a tune from her hometown. The smell of ginger and soy drifted up the stairwell, warm and steady. For the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't in a long while: calm, clean certainty. I didn't have a television in my little room above the restaurant, but word travels fast in Savannah, faster than reason, slower than shame. Mr. Lee came up one morning, newspaper in hand, his face pale. "Mr. Carter," he said softly, "you should see this." It was the Savannah Herald. The headline took up nearly half the page. "Local couple wins 85 million jackpot." There it was, Daniel and Clara's smiling faces plastered across the front page. Daniel stood stiff, awkward, like a man wearing someone else's skin. Clara, on the other hand, looked radiant, her teeth white, her hair perfectly curled, her hand resting on Daniel's shoulder like she owned him and the world. I sat down at the small table, the paper trembling slightly in my hands. There was a quote under the photo. "We're so blessed," said Clara Carter. "We plan to give back to the community, maybe start a foundation in memory of my late father-in-law." My throat burned. Late father-in-law. As if I'd already died. Below the article was a short paragraph about the house they were planning to buy on Tybee Island and the luxury SUV Clara had already placed a down payment on. I could almost hear her voice saying, "It's an investment, Daniel. Appearances matter." That night, I went downstairs for dinner. Mrs. Lee had made hot soup again, but I could barely swallow. On the small TV above the counter, a local news anchor repeated the same headline. "Savannah couple wins big $85 million from a single ticket purchased at Jin's Market. The winners, Daniel and Clara Carter, say they'll use the money to help local charities." Help. The word hung in the air like smoke. Mrs. Lee turned off the TV halfway through. "You'll fix this, Mr. Carter," she said gently. "You're too calm for a man who's lost everything." I smiled weakly. Maybe that's because I haven't lost everything yet. The next day, I met with Holloway again. He had that look, part disbelief, part resolve. "They're doubling down," he said, sliding his phone toward me. On the screen was Clara's social media post, her arm draped around Daniel, champagne glasses raised. The caption read, "Dreams do come true. Hard work, prayers, and love always win." There's no braids. There were thousands of likes and comments. "So happy for you too. Such an inspiration." People I'd known for years were congratulating them. Not one of them thought to ask if the story made sense. They've also submitted a second claim, Holloway continued. This time they attached a scanned copy of the ticket, but the signature's been tampered with. Look. He zoomed in. It was my handwriting, yes, but doctored. The ink looked darker, as if someone had traced over it. The B in Benjamin was slightly crooked. Clara's hand had always trembled a little when she was nervous. They're trying to make it look like you gave it to them, he said. I took a slow breath. They always wanted ownership, not of money, but of the story. Holloway leaned forward. We've already flagged the ticket for fraud review. It's going to get messy before it gets clean. But don't lose your patience, Mr. Carter. Patience. That word had been my prison for years. That evening, I watched from the diner window as the city lights came on one by one. Somewhere out there, my son was letting his wife rewrite our family's history in real time, and I was the ghost she'd buried alive. I whispered to myself, "Keep playing your game, Clara. I'll wait for your mask to slip." 2 evenings later, Savannah felt smaller than usual, like the whole town had squeezed itself into a single conversation about the Carters. At the diner, every booth had someone whispering about them. "Did you see her dress? Looked like she walked straight out of a magazine. They say she's buying that big house by the marina. Lucky folks. God must love them real good." I sat in my usual corner, coffee untouched, and listened. It's a strange thing to hear strangers talk about your own family as if you'd died and left your story behind. On the TV above the counter, Clara's face filled the screen again, this time from a TV interview. She was sitting on a plush white sofa, the kind that never looked lived in. A reporter leaned toward her with a microphone. "So tell us, Clara," the woman said cheerfully. "What went through your mind when you found out you were holding the winning ticket?" Clara laughed, that polished, hollow sound I once mistook for charm. "Oh, I was in total disbelief," she said. "Daniel bought it for fun. We never thought we'd actually win. It's all by the grace of God." I leaned closer to the screen. She was lying through her teeth, but so effortlessly that even Daniel, sitting beside her, looked as if he believed it for a second. Then the reporter smiled again. "And we heard your father-in-law was the one who introduced Daniel to buying lottery tickets." Clara's expression froze for half a breath. Then she recovered, flashing that practiced grin. "Yes," she said smoothly. He used to say it's just a harmless bit of hope. He'd be proud of us now, I'm sure. He'd be proud of us." I almost laughed. That same night, my phone buzzed. It was Holloway. "Turn on Channel 7, he said. I borrowed Mrs. Lee's little TV. The screen flickered, and there it was, the same news program. But this time the tone had changed. "The Georgia Lottery Commission has confirmed an ongoing investigation into a disputed winning ticket worth $85 million, the anchor announced. According to sources, conflicting claims have been filed, one of which includes a signature mismatch and alleged falsified documentation. Clara's photo appeared on the left side of the screen, Daniel's on the right, and right in the middle, my name, Benjamin Carter, original purchaser, under review. My heart didn't race. It just slowed, heavy and steady, like a train pulling out of the station after a long wait. I could almost picture them, Clara staring at the TV, Daniel fidgeting, the first crack spreading across that perfect mask. Holloway's voice came again through the phone. "We leaked the verification notice to the press," he said calmly. "From here on, it's public record. She can't hide behind lies anymore." "Then let's see how long she can keep smiling," I murmured. The next morning, Savannah Herald's website crashed. Everyone wanted the same thing, to see who the real winner was. By noon, the talk shifted from praise to suspicion. The comments turned sharp. "Wait, isn't that the same Clara who used to work at the bank? She always had a story too perfect to be true. Guess karma comes with receipts." Meanwhile, I sat by the window above the restaurant, watching the rain start to fall. I didn't feel joy, not yet, only clarity. Justice doesn't roar. It creeps in quietly, like the tide, and before you know it, everything false gets washed away. That night when I closed my eyes, I could almost hear Margaret's voice again, soft and steady. "You don't have to shout to be heard, Ben. Truth has its own echo." It was early evening when I heard the knock on my door. The rain had just started, tapping against the window of my small room above the Chinese restaurant. I thought it might be Mrs. Lee bringing supper. Instead, when I opened the door, there they were. Daniel looked smaller somehow, his shoulders hunched, eyes darting. Clara, on the other hand, stood tall, wrapped in a cream-colored coat that still smelled of new money. Her lipstick was perfect, her smile even more so, the same smile that could charm strangers and strangle truth at the same time. "Dad," Daniel started, his voice thin. "We just wanted to talk." I stepped aside without a word. They walked in, the air between us heavier than the smell of fried noodles drifting from downstairs. Clara sat first, crossing her legs neatly. "Benjamin," she said, using my first name again. "Not Dad, not even Mr. Carter. Just Benjamin. We're here because we want to resolve this peacefully. There's no need to drag family matters into court." I leaned against the wall, hands in my pockets. "Peacefully," I repeated. That's quite a word, coming from someone who threw my life out on the front lawn. Her jaw tightened, but she pressed on. "We made mistakes, all of us. But what's done is done. We just want what's fair." "Fair?" I asked, my voice low. "You mean splitting something that was never yours to begin with?" She smiled again, but the corners of her mouth trembled. "You're not being reasonable. The public already thinks we're the winners. You can't undo that overnight. So let's be smart about this. We share the prize, 50-50. You get your dignity, we keep our reputation. Everyone wins." For a moment, the only sound in the room was the hum of the old ceiling fan. Then I walked slowly to the table between us, placed my hands on the edge, and looked her straight in the eye. "I have 3 questions, Clara," I said quietly. She blinked, caught off guard. Daniel turned his head toward me, worry flickering across his face. I held up one finger. "Who threw my belongings out of the house that day?" Clara hesitated, then shifted in her seat. "That's not—" I raised a second finger. "Who called me a parasite in front of my granddaughter?" Her smile vanished completely. And then, the third finger. "Who stood there and watched it all happen?" Daniel's eyes filled with something guilt, maybe, or the beginning of understanding. He lowered his gaze to the floor. "I asked you 3 simple questions," I said. "If you can answer them honestly, we'll talk about fairness." For the first time, Clara's voice lost its polish. "You're manipulating him," she snapped. "He's fragile. He doesn't—" "Fragile?" I interrupted. "He's a grown man, Clara. He's just never had to choose between doing what's right and doing what's easy." Daniel's lips parted. His hands trembled on his knees. "Dad, I didn't mean for things to go that far. Clara cut him off, voice sharp. "Daniel, don't apologize. Not when we're this close to fixing it. He's trying to guilt-trip you. It's what old men do when they lose control." Her words hit like cold rain. But this time, I didn't flinch. Instead, I leaned forward slightly and said, "You've mistaken kindness for weakness your whole life, Clara. That's the last mistake you'll make in mine." She stood abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "We'll sue. We'll take everything you have left." I almost smiled. "Then you'd better use your own money to hire that lawyer. You won't be touching mine." The air froze. Clara's expression cracked, not much, just a flicker of disbelief. She turned to Daniel. "Are you just going to sit there?" But Daniel didn't move. He sat still, shoulders slumped, eyes wet. "I can't do this anymore," he whispered. Her face twisted, the way a mask does when it starts to melt. And then, without another word, she grabbed her purse, stormed toward the door, and disappeared into the rain. The courthouse in Savannah sat right off Wright Square, its brick walls faded but proud like an old soldier who had seen too much and survived it all. The morning air smelled of wet oak and coffee. I arrived early, holding my worn briefcase, the same one I used back when I worked for the railroad. Grant Holloway was already there, crisp suit, calm as ever. He greeted me with a nod. "You ready, Mr. Carter?" "As ready as a man can be when the truth's on his side," I said. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Reporters filled the benches, their cameras waiting like vultures for something to fall apart. Clara sat at the defense table, immaculate in a gray blazer, lips pressed tight. Daniel sat beside her, not quite beside her, really. There was a sliver of distance between them, but I noticed. When the bailiff called, "All rise," everyone stood. Judge Henderson entered, a tall, silver-haired man, with the kind of face that looked carved from patience itself. The proceedings began with the formalities, but I barely heard them. My eyes rested on the small evidence table, on the envelope that held the winning lottery ticket. My ticket. Holloway started slow, deliberate. Your Honor, today's case is simple, he said. It's about who purchased, signed, and legally owns a piece of paper, and about what greed can do to people who forget where they came from. He walked to the table, holding up the video still from Gin's market. This, he said, is Mr. Benjamin Carter, recorded purchasing the ticket on the evening in question. He played the footage. The grainy black and white image filled the monitor. There I was, hunched a little, holding the same brown coat I still wore. The clerk in the video, Mr. Gin, nodded as I paid in cash. The courtroom was silent. Then Holloway turned toward the witness stand. Mr. Gin, do you recognize this man? Yes, Mr. Gin said with his gentle accent. He come every week, always polite. He buy this ticket, I remember, because he picked numbers from birthday of his wife, Margaret. Her name sounded like a prayer in that room. Holloway smiled faintly. Thank you, sir. Next, he showed the original receipt, the timestamp matching the footage. Then, my signature bold but shaky across the back of the ticket. Your Honor, he said, the lottery's forensic division confirmed the ink and handwriting. It matches Mr. Carter's driver's license and other documents on record. It's his. Judge Henderson nodded slowly. And what about the other claimants? The opposing lawyer stood. Your Honor, my clients, Daniel and Clara Carter, were gifted the ticket by Mr. Carter prior to the drawing. Holloway tilted his head. Gifted? Is that so? Clara straightened her posture. Yes, she said. My father-in-law wanted to help us. He said if it ever won, it would be ours. There was a ripple through the crowd. Holloway took a step closer. So you're saying he gave it to you before the drawing? Yes, Clara said firmly. He wanted us to have a better future. Interesting, Holloway said, because according to this report, filed 2 days after the numbers were announced, you listed Mr. Carter as deceased. The 26 times of the force. The room gasped. Clara blinked, her mouth parting. What? That's not true. Holloway held up the paper. It's your handwriting, Mrs. Carter. You claimed guardianship over a mentally incompetent elderly man. That's Mr. Carter's name right here. The judge frowned. Are you saying she filed for guardianship? Yes, Your Honor, Holloway replied. And Adult Protective Services investigated. They found no evidence of incapacity, but they did find falsified statements under her signature. Nate, Clara's hands shook. I only... Holloway didn't let her finish. One more thing, he said softly, almost kind. A few days ago, you told a reporter your father-in-law gave you the ticket. You used those exact words. But a gift can't be given by a dead man, can it? The silence that followed was like gravity itself, heavy, inescapable. Clara opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Daniel lowered his head, his hand covering his face. Holloway turned back to the judge. Your Honor, there's no need for drama. The evidence speaks louder than any of us. My client bought, signed, and kept that ticket. Everything else, every lie, every manipulation, was an attempt to steal not just money, but dignity. Judge Henderson looked down at the papers before him, then at me. Mr. Carter, he said quietly, you've been patient. I nodded. It's all I've ever been, Your Honor. I don't lead blay. The tension in the room was so thick you could almost taste it, a blend of fear, shame, and something that felt like truth clawing its way to the surface. Judge Henderson leaned back in his chair, fingertips pressed together, eyes moving from me to Clara, and then to Daniel. I've presided over many cases of greed, he began, voice low but steady, but rarely have I seen such a cruel betrayal within a family. Clara shifted in her seat, her face pale under the courtroom lights. Her lawyer whispered something to her, but she shook her head, staring straight ahead. The judge continued. Mrs. Carter, you not only tried to claim ownership of a winning ticket that was not yours, you attempted to declare a living man incompetent. That is not just dishonest, it is immoral. Clara's lips trembled. For the first time, she didn't look angry. She looked small. Daniel finally stood, his voice cracked. Your Honor, I didn't stop her. That's on me. I thought I was protecting my family, but all I did was destroy it. The judge gave him a long, measured look. Mr. Carter, Silence in the face of wrongdoing is its own form of participation. Daniel nodded, eyes red. Holloway rose once more. Your Honor, my client never sought revenge. He sought recognition, the truth, plain and simple. He lost his home, his belongings, and nearly his faith in people he loved. All we ask today is for the court to acknowledge what's already proven. Away. Judge Henderson tapped his gavel softly. The court acknowledges, he said, that the original and only legal owner of the lottery ticket verified by video, receipt, and signature is Mr. Benjamin Carter. There was a pause. Then his voice grew firm. Therefore, the court rules that the full prize of $85 million rightfully belongs to Mr. Carter. The room erupted. Applause burst out from the gallery, reporters, strangers, even the bailiff smiled. Clara slumped in her seat, one hand covering her mouth. Daniel sat still, staring at the floor. Holloway turned to me with a quiet grin. You did it, Mr. Carter. But I didn't feel like cheering. I just sat there for a moment, letting the noise fade into a distant hum. Then I stood, buttoned my jacket, and looked at the judge. Thank you, Your Honor, I said. My voice was calm, almost a whisper. This isn't about money. It's about remembering that what's right still matters. Azarias. Judge Henderson gave me a slow nod. Indeed it does, Mr. Carter. Indeed it does. As I walked out of the courtroom, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted my name, their questions chasing me down the courthouse steps. But I didn't answer. Outside, Savannah's sky was overcast again, soft drizzle hanging in the air. The city felt quieter than I remembered, or maybe it was me who'd finally gone quiet inside. At the edge of the courthouse lawn, a young reporter asked, Mr. Carter, how does it feel to win? I stopped, looked at her, and thought of Margaret, her laughter in the kitchen, her soft hands on my shoulders, the smell of coffee every morning. It doesn't feel like winning, I said. It feels like coming home, and I walked away. Across the street, the church bells of Street Luke rang noon, the same bells that once marked my mornings with Margaret, and now, maybe, marked the start of something new. People say that after you win something big, life changes overnight. They're wrong. For me, it didn't change overnight, it changed slowly, like a wound learning how to heal. After the court ruling, the checks, the press, the endless letters from people I'd never met, I spent weeks in silence. I didn't touch the money at first. I just sat on the porch of the little room above the Chinese diner, listening to the city hum below, wondering what Margaret would have told me to do. I could almost hear her voice, that soft Savannah drawl of hers. Don't let bitterness be the thing that outlives you, Ben. So one morning, I put on my old jacket and walked down to the local branch of Coastal Bank. I opened 2 accounts. One was named the Benjamin and Margaret Carter Foundation, meant for senior citizens who had no one left, people abandoned by their own children, just like me once was. The second, the Ella and Noah Education Fund. Every cent in that one was locked tight until the kids turned 18. No early withdrawals, no loopholes. No one could touch it, not even me. The banker looked surprised when I told her. That's quite a legacy, Mr. Carter. I smiled faintly. It's not a legacy, ma'am. It's just setting the record straight. Daniel called a week later. His voice was quieter than I remembered, stripped of that nervous energy that used to fill the room whenever Clara was around. Dad, he said, I filed for divorce. I didn't answer right away. I just let the sound of that sentence settle between us. He continued, I know it's late, too late to fix a lot of things. But I joined a support group for single fathers. They meet at the Methodist Church every Thursday. I'm trying, Dad. For the first time in years, I heard truth in his voice, raw, unpolished, but real. Keep showing up, I told him. That's all any man can do. Thanks for watching. A month later, I left Savannah for good. Not because I hated it, but because I'd given it enough of my years. I found a small cottage in Seabrook, right by the bay, where the air smelled like salt and pine. I planted roses out front, red ones, the kind Margaret loved. Every morning, I watered them while the sun climbed over the water. The waves sounded like her laughter, distant but still alive somehow. Daniel came to visit one Sunday with Ella and little Noah. He'd grown thinner, but his eyes were clearer. Ella ran up the porch steps, holding her turquoise bicycle freshly repainted. Grandpa, look! I fixed her up all by myself. I crouched down beside her, touching the smooth handlebar. She looks beautiful, sweetheart. You ride her far? Down to the pier and back, she said proudly. Daddy said you used to fix trains, so bikes are easy for you, right? I chuckled. Trains don't wobble this much, honey. But yeah, I can handle a bike or two. We spent that afternoon cooking clam chowder together, Margaret's old recipe. Daniel chopped the onions while I stirred the pot, the smell of garlic and cream filling the kitchen. For a moment, it felt like the years had folded back, like she might walk in from the porch any minute, scolding me for making a mess. When dinner was ready, we sat out on the porch. The sun was setting behind the water, turning everything gold. Daniel raised his glass of sweet tea. "To Mom," he said softly. I nodded. "To Margaret." And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a man who had been betrayed. I felt like a man who'd been restored. Life had settled into a quiet rhythm. Mornings at the diner for coffee, afternoons tending to the garden, evenings spent on the porch with a book and the sound of the waves for company. I thought that chapter of my life, the painful one, was finally closed. Until one gray afternoon, someone knocked on my door. When I opened it, Clara was standing there. Her hair was no longer styled, just pulled back messily. Her clothes hung loose. The diamond ring she once flashed so proudly was gone. "Mr. Carter," she started, voice trembling slightly. I didn't know where else to go. I didn't say anything, just stepped aside enough for her to see the warmth of the living room, the vase of roses on the table, the quiet peace she once tried to destroy. She looked smaller somehow, the sharpness in her eyes gone. "I lost the house," she said softly. "The car, too. I've been staying at a friend's place. I thought maybe you could help me find a job. Or anything." I nodded toward the kitchen table. "Sit." I made tea peppermint, the kind Margaret used to drink when her nerves got the best of her. I handed Clara a cup and sat across from her. "You're not the same woman I used to know," I said. She looked up, eyes brimming. "I was blinded, Mr. Carter. I thought control meant love. I thought money meant safety. I was wrong." I slid a folded piece of paper across the table, a printed list from the local employment center. "I can't give you money, Clara," I said quietly, "but I can give you direction." Her fingers trembled as she took the paper. She whispered, "You really won't help me with money?" I looked her in the eye. "This door," I said, "only opens for honesty. As a doctor's." For a moment, there was silence, just the sound of the clock ticking. Then she nodded, her shoulders shaking as the tears came. "I guess I finally understand what that means," she whispered. I didn't speak. Some lessons aren't meant to be explained, just lived. When she left, I watched from the porch as she walked down the dirt road, her figure fading against the pale horizon. For the first time, I didn't feel anger toward her, only a quiet kind of closure. That evening, Daniel and the kids came by. The air smelled of salt and jasmine. Ella brought her turquoise bike again. "Grandpa," she said, "can we ride by the bay?" "Of course we can," I smiled. We rode slowly along the coastal road, the wind soft against our faces. The sky turned amber, then purple, then gold, the kind of sunset Margaret used to love. At one point, I looked back and saw Daniel standing by the fence, watching us, one hand raised in a small, grateful wave. As we reached the end of the trail, Ella stopped her bike and pointed toward the water. "Grandma would have liked this place," she said. I swallowed hard. "She already does, sweetheart. She's right here." The waves lapped gently against the shore. The light flickered across Ella's hair, across the turquoise bike, across the horizon that seemed endless. And for the first time in years, I felt something I thought I'd lost forever: peace. Not the loud kind that demands to be heard, but the quiet kind that whispers. Justice doesn't need revenge. It only needs to be seen. I turned the key to lock the front door that night, and the hinges creaked softly the same way they always did. But this time, it sounded less like a warning and more like a lullaby. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box to the right